Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. This is kind of a fun setup here at Visti. If you can't hear me, drop it in the chat. This is a small group, so feel free to drop questions, comments, thoughts in the chat, or just unmute and say, I have something wonderful to share. If you can't hear me, now would be the time to tell me in the chat. We're the first one, we're the practice one. And you are welcome to turn on your cameras, but I know probably a lot of you are at home listening while you're making your kids breakfast or doing laundry. So if I don't see your faces, hi, nice to meet you. Something's in the chat.
Yeah.
Good morning, great. My name is Anna Bayless. I work in Albemarle County. This is my first year as a technology integrator. That's what we call TDRTs. No, excuse me. What are they called? ITRTs.
ITRTs.
ITRTs, we call them LTIs. Everyone's got to be a little different. This is my 19th year in Albemarle County. I spent 8 years in the classroom, and then I spent 10 years as an elementary school librarian. So I've been used to being a specialist with a lot of kids, and the buildings I've worked in have a lot of needs, a lot of languages, a lot of poverty, a lot of trauma. So I am ready to talk about some of the small behaviors and some of the big behaviors. The slides will be available at the end, and I believe you're able to get them as well through the Visti website. So let's get started. If you want to drop in the chat what you do, what your fancy title is, please feel free. Just a little brief look at our schedule. We're going to talk about the behavior concerns in your class. So if you have anything specific, now is a wonderful time to drop them in the chat. Where kids are emotionally, some people will agree, some won't, but research will support that COVID has really put us in retrograde in so many ways. So where are we? How can we promote self-regulation? How can we pull back on the screen time? And then the bulk of it, what do we do when they start doing infractions? Because I think that's our hardest part. Technology teacher K through 4, certified SPED teacher as well. Beautiful. So in the chat, if you could drop in, if you feel comfortable, 1 or 2 or 3, if you've got them, behaviors surrounding technology that are inhibiting instruction and learning. Where are we getting roadblocked? Where are kids stopping learning? Where are you stopping your ability to teach? So take a moment, pop a few things in the chat if you're able. I know some of you are listening while you're doing a million things. And if you just walked in, welcome, or popping into the chat. What behaviors surrounding technology are inhibiting your instruction? This part's always easier in the live session. A lot of things that I've seen or heard from other teachers are misuse of technology, kids not being able to look away from the screen, kids struggling to give up the technology when it's time to give it up, kids feeling way easily frustrated when they are presented with new technology to try. They kind of want that Candy Crush world, and they want an instant gratification, and troubleshooting is something that children are struggling with. Anything else in the chat? And again, choosing to go to different websites, we will talk about that. Distracted behavior, lots of questions. We are going to talk about the power of questioning and how to politely table it when needed. Let's continue on. And again, feel free to drop questions in the chat or unmute and do comments. So let's talk about our feelings. Everything is about self-care, and probably if anyone in your district says, don't forget self-care, you're going to lose it, because we talk a lot about it, but we don't actually have the time or capacity or resources to do it. So let's talk a little bit about how we feel when children are off task or blatantly misusing technology, because we have emotions too. And here are just 3 of them. And again, you're always welcome in the chat to add something else. I will say my chief emotion when I've worked hard to prepare a lesson and I can tell the children aren't attending, especially when they're intentionally not attending, I feel angry. And it's probably because I'm a full-time working mom with kids at home, and I used my time to make lessons and pieces are falling apart. And the first thing we can do to help the children is to normalize these feelings. We do not have to be emotionless robots continuing on just hoping it'll get better. It is perfectly reasonable and acceptable to stop the instruction, turn off whatever board you're using, pull back on the technology and have a talk. Kiddos, when you're not listening to my lesson, I'm starting to feel frustrated. I even feel a little bit angry. Or I've worked hard to make a great lesson for us. I'm starting to feel sad. What can we do? How can we restart? Normalize your emotions, partly for yourself, but partly because there are children in the room who are feeling exactly the same way you are. And they need to hear that the emotions they're feeling are correct or are normal. And I keep popping in and out of the chat, so I'm sorry if I look away from you. Fluidity of understanding technology while also trying to learn academics. Yes, we've got kids at all different levels with technology. They all think they're amazing and great and the best at it. Normalize those feelings and share them with the class. It's just take a moment, if you would. I know we're all able to read, although for those of you folding laundry, maybe I will read it out loud. Our county is doing a book study, Digital Citizenship, and there's a wonderful quote in it. It's not reasonable to expect that our children will be able to translate the norms we teach them about their behavior in the physical world to the very different context of the digital world if they've never had the chance to practice there. And again, connections or thoughts about that, please drop them in the chat. There is a disconnect between their physical self and their digital self, and we constantly have to work on expressing the norms and the desires for both of those worlds. They feel that when they're an avatar, or it's just a chat, or they get lost looking into the screen, and we're going to talk about technology addiction, they forget that they are a person who is affecting the way their classroom community is feeling, and we have to help them with that. These children are in a very unique place where they have had a huge inundation of technology, but not a lot of work creating the citizenship around that. Think about how much time a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher spends those first weeks creating that classroom community. And all teachers do it in their own way, but we spend literal weeks on those foundational skills and their human citizenship. And how do we translate to their digital citizenship? It takes just as much work. So let's talk a little bit of research. And when you get the slides at the end, there's links to all of these articles if you care to read a little bit more. Patience is developmental, and development has been interrupted. I was speaking with a child therapist who said during COVID, you could expect for every month that children were away from their educational environment was a month lost in development and emotional needs. So we've heard this before, but it really can be a wonderful thing to remind yourself when you are preparing your lessons, or if a lesson is not going well, depending on how long a child was out for COVID or learning virtually. A second grader might emotionally be a halfway through the year kindergartner. That's a very different creature to put technology in their hands. You think about how many minutes would you give a piece of technology to a second grader is wildly different from how long you'd give technology to a fifth grader. But if that fifth grader is at a third grade developmental level, then you have to make those adjustments. So we have to make adjustments for where they are. And that can help us when we're having those emotions of anger or frustration or hopelessness, is to pull things back a little bit and remember where they are developmentally. This study is linked. There's a lot of information out there about what kids have lost during COVID, but the numbers are pretty impressive. 84% of schools surveyed agree or strongly agree, actually that one's 87, that behavior development has been negatively impacted. 48% increase in acts of disrespect, prohibited use of devices. And that does run the gamut from sneaking a little Minecraft in when you're supposed to be doing math to a high schooler who's brought in technology that they're not supposed to have. So that is holistically across public schools. But the children are in a tough place. And I know as a teacher, I spent a lot of time normalizing. It's okay. You were in COVID. You do your best. You try hard. And looking back, I wish I had not spent so much time almost coddling these kiddos. They had a lot of coddling at home, and absolutely we should support them emotionally, but I think a lot of us forgot to lay out those expectations. So now we're dealing with kids who don't want to turn in homework, or who feel that if I don't do this work, it's okay. And they're not wrong. Ice cream will still be delicious. They'll still be able to catch a rerun of Thomas the Train, no matter how many math assignments that they skip. So we have to really help them understand that broad picture of what they can do and what they can't do, and what it will mean for them as a lifelong learner. Again, any thoughts or chats, throw them in there or unmute. Self-regulation. We hear this a lot. And this is our work as technology teachers to help them learn pieces of self-regulation specifically tied to technology, of course, in their whole life. And it's beyond saying, be patient, take your time, really spending some time talking about the why behind it. I have a 2-year-old and an almost 9-year-old, and I am probably asked, but why? At least 57 times a day, which can be frustrating. And someone was mentioning there are so many questioners that we can really get off task fairly quickly. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about curiosity and how powerful it is. But to also have them be in control of their own track, self-regulating their learning, self-regulating their place in the classroom community. And we'll do that as a group, because there are children who are going to be in your group who can do it just fine. They're your models. But we're finding that more and more we've got less children who are able to do it. So part of our work is to put in those lessons with the technology lessons. Let's talk about when it gets to blatant addiction, because when you identify students who are an addict of technology, then you might need to call in some other resources. Counselors, emotional coaches, administration. There might need to be talk with parents, which can be incredibly awkward, because then we're crossing the line of what they consider acceptable technology use at home and what we have at school. So take a quick glance down this list of signs of addiction in technology. Often these are similar signs of addiction to anything, to a substance, to a food. I'll read through them just in case there are people driving in a car or something. Unable to self-regulate the amount of screen time, loss of interest in other activities, preoccupies thoughts, interferes with socializing, creates emotional breakdown, tolerance increase, signs of deceit when using technology, and technology is used as a soothing technique. That last one, if you do a little deeper look into the research, technology used as a soothing technique, the #1 demographic are adults. If you think about when was the last time you were able to wait in line for coffee or ride an elevator or sit at a red light without taking a quick peek at some piece of technology, the research is showing it's not that we are so interested in the knowledge, it's become a self-soother. It's the adult baby rattle that we just need to zone out and look at the screen a little bit to detach from some of the stressors in our life, whether it be the traffic or thinking about what's for dinner. And that was when, for me, made me pause and go, how often am I popping out a phone just to look at it, not even realizing I'm doing it because it feels good, because it calms me down, because it makes me feel like I'm in control. So that's definitely an area I'm working on. Looking at this list, if anyone's comfortable sharing in the chat, are there any of these chief ones you're seeing among your students? The one I hear most from teachers when I do presentations on this topic are signs of deceit when using technology. Luckily, a lot of our little kids are pretty horrible little bluffers, so they're just blatantly on the wrong website when they're not supposed to be. But for older kids, they certainly get incredibly creative. I'm going to look at the chat and see what you are sharing. All of them, says Daniel. Yep, all of them. Loss of interest in activities, yet there is a stigma. If it's not technology, then what is the point to some of them? Signs of deceit, I would say that's the chief one that I hear. It's kind of interesting to hear what's county to county. And we're going to talk about one of the ways to help them with their addiction is to pull back. I know cold turkey is a way that works for some people like smokers, but for children, cold turkey on anything is usually not the best way to go. So how can we gently pull them back? Now, I would say if you were reading these and, holistically, you feel like this is a lot of my students. But if you have 2 or 3 kids, or maybe just one kid where you think, wow, I am seeing many of these boxes ticked, that might be something you want to have a talk with someone in your building about. I know a lot of us are living in our cars, driving from school to school, and that can be really hard. But if you can think about someone in the building that you might want to talk to about that. And the classroom teacher is also an incredible resource. Theory of the mind. So why are they like this? Why are children just really difficult and hard? Theory of the mind has been around for a long time. Many people have originated this, but Descartes is probably one of the most famous ones. Theory of the mind normally develops around 3 years old, somewhere between 3 and 5. And what it is when a child realizes, hey, these other humans around me have thoughts and wants and needs too. I have that 2-year-old. I use him a lot as my reference point. And I would say he doesn't have a lot of this developed yet. So he would like to have chicken nuggets again for dinner. Yes, please. Why wouldn't we all? Because they're delicious. It's hard for him to understand that I am sick and tired of chicken nuggets, or there's really not that much nutritional value and I pretend that they're a little healthier than they are. Or he loves to play with trains, and I'm sitting next to him playing those trains because that's good parenting, but also bored out of my mind and wishing I was listening to a podcast. Theory of mind starts to slowly develop. It usually starts with emotions. If a child notices that someone is crying or angry or over the top happy, they notice those extremes of emotions, and they're able to start realizing, wow, other people are feeling a certain way too. And that develops more and more and more. And before COVID, before even the last 10 years, when children would get to kindergarten, many of them had a very solid theory of the mind. They would understand that other people had other feelings, that their thoughts and pieces were not the only ones. And it really is another important piece for us to remember. It's not that children, I don't care what you want. They don't even realize you have wants, some of them. Some of your younger children, especially who are more emotionally underdeveloped right now, don't even realize that the friends around them have wants and needs, and that their wants and needs could be disrupting instruction. If you have specific comments on that, please drop them in the chat. And so that's some of our work. We have to talk specifically about, hey, the other people in our room are getting work done too. I will often tell children who are becoming frustrated or pausing our work, if we're using technology, I'll gently put it away and I will tell them I'm going to give it back. We'll talk about that. And I will say, just observe the room. Just take a look. Who do you see doing some math? Who do you see doing some reading? Just to look and to see beyond themselves what else is going on. That's a good practice for children who are pretty stunted in that piece. Okay. Giving up technology. When I talk with teachers, and what's hard about technology and prying it out of their little fingers can be some of the hardest. And it's partly because they're really interested in your amazing lessons, partly because children are struggling with technology addiction, and partly children are just not the best at transitions in general. So here are just some pieces, things that you can do to help them with that. Normalize the difficulty of putting it away. I talk a lot with kids at the beginning of the year. I'm sure we all do a lot of digital citizenship lessons and taking a break. And I will ask them to think about the people in their home and, who struggles to put their technology away. And they're all going, my mom, my dad, my grandma. And I do invite them to have that conversation with their grown-ups. So, could you put your phone down? I want to talk to you about something, because again, we don't realize it's our rattle. So talk with them. It's not just a kid problem. It's an everybody thing. It's hard to put it down. It's a big bowl of delicious digital ice cream. I don't want to put it down. And to help them understand that it is okay, and it is okay that it's hard. State your feelings. We've talked about that. A transparent timeline at the very beginning of the presentation. I gave you a quick timeline of what we're doing. For many people, that is incredibly helpful, especially for your anxious students who really need to have a big picture to feel comfortable to learn. A little timeline of what you're doing can be incredibly helpful. I know a lot of us are bouncing from room to room, kind of popping in for 30 to 60 minutes. You still have the ability to do a short timeline, and we'll talk about that. Even if it's on a whiteboard, even if it's a screen you've pre-prepared, even if the best you can do is verbally, hey guys, so excited to be here. Today, after we have a quick meeting, we're going to continue our work on our Scratch programs, and then we're going to do a museum share. Just a little bit of a timeline to regulate what you're doing. We'll talk a little bit more about timers. Individual check-ins for those who need it. So if you've got those kids who are really struggling, give them a private check-in. So, and not doing it in front of everybody. Peter, don't forget, you had a hardest time giving up your iPad last time. Get real close to that child, very quiet, very private. I'm going to give people a warning. I just want to give you an extra one. You've been working so hard. I'm putting away your technology. Get ready. I'm about to do it. Maybe you'll be the first one to put it away. All right, class, get ready. We have 2 more minutes, then we're going to wrap up our technology for right now. And it is not a magic fix that will happen the first day. Keep using that language, keep doing it over and over again, keep normalizing that it's hard. They will get a little more used to it. And then coach them through the reflection process. This can be a whole group if the whole class stinks at putting stuff away, or if you just need to grab a few kids. Maybe it went beautifully, maybe it didn't go beautifully. It doesn't matter. Either way, talk through coaching. A good sports coach is not just going to point out the things that didn't go well. He or she's going to hone in on the pieces that went really well too. So make sure you're giving your kids both kinds of feedback. Thoughts and comments, keep dropping them in if you need to. A couple more things for looking away from your technology. Oh, I see my image didn't make it through. I'll have to model it for you. For iPads, we do some practice putting them face down. I do caution against the terminology flip over your iPad. Hasn't happened to me yet, but I've heard from other tech teachers in the county that kids go, wee! No, showing them how to gently flip it over. I've heard the phrase Pac-Man your laptop, taco your laptop, and that's just, I'll just use my hands, shutting the screen enough so it's not totally logging off. In our county, if you shut it, or mostly shut it, then the kiddo's gonna have to log in again, or the adult's gonna have to, and that can be really frustrating. But showing them how to partly do it. And I was in, I stole this idea from another teacher. It's one of the beautiful things about being these tech teachers. We get to be in a lot of places. I loved what she said to her students. She just said, I make sure I do this when I'm in faculty meetings so that I can show my respect to the speaker. And I absolutely love that and have been using that myself. So that's another good one for laptops. We're going to get back to it, but let's just taco it for a moment or turn it around and taco it too. A transparent timeline. Timers. A lot of us get kind of hooked on the same timer. Right now, a lot of places have Promethean boards or some other kind of smart board, and we use the one that's embedded. By this time of the year, probably 2 months prior, they're tuning out that particular timer. They don't hear it anymore. Just like any of your call and response things, the clapping technique, you know, when I say purple, you say unicorn. I don't know what your school does, but mix it up and also give them a little preview. Today, we're going to use this bell. I didn't bring it in with me. I have a cowbell, I have chimes, and I will say it at the beginning, today, when I need your attention, we're going to use this sound. And then we practice it a little bit. And I know when you're zipping from room to room, that's probably the last thing you want to do is hear a cowbell 12 times that day. It's very helpful. And again, helps those kids with that anxiety. And those individual check-ins are really powerful. Here's a model of our schedule that we did. You could do something similar. Responsive classroom. I have extensive training in responsive classroom, and I do love it. If you haven't used it, it is a way of really emphasizing modeling with logical consequences to make sure that children are focused and successful. They use the terminology, it works for about 90% of the kids 90% of the time. And so I've spent a lot of time in my research finding what we can do for that other 10% of kids 10% of the time, and have really found that it's effective for lots of kids. So I do like responsive classroom, but I do like to supplement it. Post your expectations. Again, many of us are going room to room. So you might have pre-made anchor charts. You might use this as a conversation, but you want to be able to quickly point to something that says, laptops are put away as soon as we hear the chimes, or we are only using these 3 apps today. There are a few children I've had to write contracts for. These are the websites you may use in the building. And everything else is a no unless you've sought approval, because what you want to do is eliminate, which I'm sure we've all heard, oh, nobody said I couldn't get on Amazon and check the price of Legos. Oh, but at home, I'm allowed to use Fortnite with my older brother. You want to make sure you emphasize the, unless you hear a yes, it is a no. Which responsive classroom doesn't like the word no, but I think it's powerful sometimes. Build in discussion time. I know, especially for us who are specialists, our time is incredibly precious. We don't get through our lessons half the time. We're zipping out the door telling the teachers, let me know how it goes. And for those of us who were classroom teachers or other kinds of specialists, that can be an uncomfortable feeling. But build in the discussion time with the technology. Even if it's something they've used before, you need a small piece of discussion, partly as a reminder, but partly so you can eliminate the conversation later of, but I forgot. If you've gone through it, they're probably not going to try the, oh, but I forgot. I would be aware that it is okay to not give the technology. If a kid is not able to say, yes, I can follow those rules, they don't need to use it. They can be an observer that day. And I offer that out. If you really don't feel comfortable doing it yourself today, sit next to a buddy and you can observe them and let me know when you feel like you are ready. But if you haven't gotten an yay, verily, I feel like I can do this, then I wouldn't give them the piece of technology. I was working on contracts with first grade about iPad use. And one little guy said, no, I don't feel like I could sign that yet. And I said, totally fair. I'm going to take your iPad with me and I'll be back and I'll check in and you think about if you're feeling ready to do it. I think in part, he just wanted to see what would happen. Boy, was it powerful for the other kids to see it leaving the room. And I came back in a couple hours and he still wasn't ready. And I came back the next morning and then he was ready. To make sure that you are building in time to get everyone on the same page and have that discussion. And that can help with the curiosity and the asking questions. This is the time to ask those questions, guys. We're having discussion time. Pulling back on screen time, which is a hard thing to say as a technology teacher, but they have too much. There are no longer guidelines from the American Association of Pediatrics. A lot of us, especially if we were parents, remember that it was to the minute. Absolutely no screen time before 2, a half hour between the ages of 2 and 3, and it would gently increase. There was never anything formal on how much screen time in school. And starting in about 2018, but certainly through COVID, the American Association of Pediatrics changed their language to be a healthy use of media, because they were finding that parents who were following it so strictly wouldn't let their children Skype with a grandmother that they couldn't go visit for a year and a half. And that was more of a stressor than an extra episode of, I can't think of any of these television shows. Luckily, my kids don't watch that much. I don't know, Descendants? I guess that's a movie. And so they really want to have a healthy use of media habits. That's hard to regulate in school because there is no magical time. And what we want to do is make sure that we are encouraging the best use of technology at the best times. And sometimes in our role, we feel a little bit like a narc, or that we are the angel on the shoulder that nobody asked for. But to be putting this information out to our classroom teachers in a gentle but informative way can really help them think about when they're using and why. Offer breaks. A responsive classroom, if you know it, loves the concept of quiet time, which is building in points throughout the day, usually one big chunk after something rowdy like lunch or recess, where they can journal or read. I like the concept of quiet time. I don't love when it becomes even more structured than the learning time. A child who just played an awesome game of soccer, or who lost and is frustrated, or came out of the cafeteria with his or her ears ringing, might not be in the mood to read a chapter of Charlotte's Web. So if you are able to offer a few minutes for yourself, and that language of me caring about you is very powerful to them, build in some time talking about what a break could look like. Maybe it needs to be a physical one, maybe it needs to be a quiet one. But make sure you are giving opportunities for breaks. So if you do know the classroom morning meeting model, it's got 4 components: greeting, share, activity, and message. And you're not always going in the morning, but even an abbreviated version of this can be really wonderful to get your lesson going and to ground the children and to clue them into what you're doing today. So here are a few examples of how you could do it. Greeting and share, I roll that in very small. I do go beyond good morning, class. Personally, I do not care for good morning, students, and they go, good morning, and I go, I can hear you. Nobody likes that. I try to think of something. We do a song often. I don't mind embarrassing myself in front of children. I usually, any greeting I do, if we stand in a circle and do the ET finger touch or an elbow bump, or we do alien voice, there's a million wonderful ones out there that I'm sure you know, even 60 seconds or less. For sharing, again, I try to do it unplugged away from the screens. It can be something like, show me a thumbs up, side or down, and calling out things like, how do you feel about cheese pizza? How do you feel about sushi? Or every now and then I'll do what I call a 60-second spotlight, and I'll highlight one child and we'll put a timer on for 60 seconds, or I'll just look at the clock and kind of rapid fire some fun questions at the kids. And they can do a me too, if it's something that they connect with, or they can do, we teach the sign language word for respect. You know, it's not for me, but I respect that you like it. And I make sure that I'm not asking, what was your worst memory of kindergarten? Fun and friendly things. If you could have one superpower, what would you have? Why did you get your middle name? Why did your parents pick that? If you could have a bowl of ice cream, what would it be? What would the toppings be? Fun and friendly, building your community slowly, and getting them away from the technology, because it's all in our title. They know if you're coming, you're bringing something fantastic, and their little fingers are ready to click or touch. Then we want to let them know that, yes, we are technology teachers, but that's not all we do. And it's not going to be the whole time. An activity, often I try to embed the activity into the work we're doing anyway. So for instance, last week we were building a Minecraft challenge. They had 30 minutes to design and create a castle that had a moat and doors and windows. And we sort of did a version of Simon Says, making a moat, and they'd have to do a water sign or making a window or pretending to open a door. Show me moat, show me a window, just a little bit to get them going and ground them in the activity. And then your own message. It doesn't have to be morning message. It can be 4 in the afternoon message, a little something that tells them about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And especially for your kids who are visual, they might prefer to read this on their own. Here's just an example. I'll read it for the car drivers. Dear clever coders, today we're going to continue building our games in Scratch. Remember to take a moment to do museum walks and get inspiration from peers. You can also watch a pixel art tutorial if you've finished the required elements. Be brilliant. Positive teacher language. Again, at any point, if you've got comments, questions, thoughts, drop them in there. As much as you can, stay in the positive. And we're all going to have those days where that is a little bit harder. That's where the coffee with 1 extra shot of espresso comes in. But as much positivity as you could do. I'm not talking sunshine and rainbows, but I am talking clear, effective language. So the first thing you can do is catch it quick. If you see or hear a little whisper of something that is going to derail the lesson, or let's go back to Minecraft. She said no weapons, but an axe is kind of a tool. So I'm sure I could use the sword quite as well. Like, oh, cool. I heard Bryce saying he might use the sword to cut the tree. Let's clarify real quick. What kind of tools could you use versus weapons? 3 facets: reminding, reinforcing, and redirecting. Reminding is just what I did there with Bryce wanting to get a sword to cut down a rose bush. Remind them of what they need to be doing. Reinforcing is incredibly positive. Oh my goodness, I see so many kiddos carrying their laptops with 2 hands. You're not going to call out one kid, and that's kind of an old practice that we still get stuck on. I see Gwendolyn holding her laptop. That makes me happy. I see many children holding those laptops with 2 hands. Gwendolyn knows I'm talking to her. Redirection is when they veer off course. You don't want to embarrass anybody. So if it really is just 1 or 2 kids, that's the time for that private check-in. I noticed that you were holding your laptop on top of your head. Show me how to hold it with 2 hands. Fantastic. Keep going. Praise is feedback, not manipulation. And I just mentioned this. So I'm not going to say, Todd, oh, Todd, I wish everyone was like, Todd, you're doing such an incredible job. Incredible job at what? Converting carbon and oxygen? They don't know. Take away the child's name and talk intentionally about what is going on. I see a lot of kiddos using the keyboard instead of the touch screen. Great job challenging yourself. If you're ready for it, that's wonderful. If there is specific praise for a kiddo because they need it, it's important to them, it's important to their learning. Maybe this is one of your tough kiddos who's been working on something, then it's personal. get really close if it's a good time for it. If you have time, and I know that's the most hilarious thing I could say, but if you have time to write a little note for a kid, even if they can't read it, they'll take it home. Someone will read it there, or their teacher will. And I will do that sometimes. I just keep index cards with me. I don't have anything cute anymore. I ran out. And I just give them a quick, I want you to have this note to read when you're available. You've done a beautiful job today staying on task. Take this note with you. It's an important thing. Kids love to have a something. Screen-free lessons. Challenge yourself to pull back a little bit. What can be done in our jobs without the screen? It could just be that you're going to spend the beginning of your lesson using anchor charts and discussion and turn off the board and unplug the laptop, taco your own laptop for a little bit. For kids who are expecting you to come in with a handful of digital glitter immediately, give them some notice. Guys, next time I come in, we're going to do unplugged coding. We're not going to need any laptops at all. I'm not even going to bring mine. Just be aware, next time we're not going to use any digital technology. That helps those kids with anxiety or who are really excited for you to bring a Bee-Bot or an Ozobot, and what you brought in instead was a bunch of plastic bouncy balls. It helps them get excited about the new things. Consider what you're picking. Is it active or passive? I know we walk into a lot of rooms and see more passive media than we wish we did. We see things like BrainPop being used just for the video, even though that's incredibly surface level. If you haven't done BrainPop 101, I highly encourage it. There's amazing stuff there. Is what you're showing them eating up a few minutes? Is it better than a discussion? Is it better than instruction? Is it better than a think, pair, share? Really save the technology, the screen, for the active work as much as possible. Now, I do, tell my friends, I can't believe how much my child says they're on screen time. Hey, we all know about assessment season, or you were up all night with your own kid who was sick. We have to do it sometimes, but as much as possible, active media. Intentional eye breaks. Teach that to the children. The kind of trite recommendation is every 20 minutes, take 20 seconds to look at something that is 20 feet away. And also sometimes there's a rider for you need to be at least 20 inches away from your technology. We all know that we see a lot of kids who are 4 inches away from their technology at best. Teaching how to do eye breaks is really wonderful. More research. I love research. I used to be a librarian. They're finding that by the age of 8, there's a 30% increase in children who need glasses at that young age. And a lot of it has to do with looking at screens. So make sure that you build in time for eye breaks and model it. I have posters, but I'm not going to stand here on screen and hold up a poster, that when I have my own room, I have an object far across and a little higher up so that they're getting to stretch their necks up. We're getting a lot of children and adults with hunched shoulders, so that they have something to look at. I don't set a timer for every 20 minutes. I think that's too little. I want them to look even more. And I also encourage teachers to put an object for them to look at the opposite end of the room for themselves. Because the children might be looking at the object behind the teacher. Get something for yourselves. And again, do that self-talk that normalize. Guys, while I'm talking to you, I'm going to give myself an eye break. So I am just going to look out the window just for a moment and think about the wonderful work we've done and give my eyes a break. I might even close them for a moment. Feel free to join me if you think you need it. That's part of that self-regulation, teaching them how to take their own eye breaks. I also talk about, you're not going to offend me if you need to stand up and take a stretch break. I encourage them to do what I call a museum walk. Get up and walk around the room and see what your buddies are doing. And there's always some kid who goes, oh my God, he's looking at my ideas. He's stealing them. And I try to teach the word, you are inspiring. You are inspiring your friends. It's a wonderful strategy for kids who also get stuck, or you can tell that they're about to lose it. Get up and take a museum walk. Go look around. I'm going to pop over to the chat. Yeah, stretch breaks are great. I see an awful lot of Go Noodles out there, and there's a lot of cool stuff. But if it's been screen heavy, if you can do your own stretch break, or I keep a Bluetooth speaker with me, play some music, have a mini dance party if you need it. And again, I offer what do they need. There's always a kid or two who doesn't want to do the Go Noodle because they feel it's silly or they're tired. I do offer other things, or, go to your desk and put your head down for a minute, or walk over to the window and find 5 green things. Yes, lots of breaks. Stretch breaks are wonderful. Okay, fidgets. Yay, fidgets. I think I must have been only 2 or 3 years as a librarian when the fidget spinners came out. And I hadn't even heard of them. I just remember teaching a group of kids, and suddenly I saw 2 or 3 things spinning on the floor. What is that? This is a quote I love. Kids, let me tell you about fidgets. We had perforations from printer paper and twang in the doorstop, and I was never happier in my life. That's a quote from my husband, who had a rant at our children the other day when they were looking for fidgets. There's a great article here from Scientific American that talks about fidgets, how fidgets have been around for years, since the clicky pen. And we all grew up in a time where we went to school and we didn't have fidgets or technology. And if you had extra energy to burn, I know I did, we had to come up with something. I'm a very proficient pen twirler. I can do it really, really well. Somewhere about high school, I realized I need that. I still need something. Oh, it's actually in my pocket. This is not planted. I keep a weighted piece of glass in my pocket when I remember to. It's a little something for me to play with if I just need to channel that energy a bit and I don't want to use my phone as my baby rattle. Fidgets should be 2 things. They should be tactile and they should not require eye contact. So that is why the fidget spinner is a toy, and I will use that language with the kids. That's a really fun toy. Please put it away for later. I do allow some fidgets as needed when I travel room to room. I keep a little pocket full of them. I'm now serving 1,000 children in 2 different schools, a literal 1,000. So I haven't learned everybody yet, but I do keep weighted objects like this. Did I bring? I have weighted animals. I didn't bring one with me. Marble fidgets. I have lots of marble fidgets. When I'm going to a room, especially if it's a room I haven't been in, and they're not going to get to use technology, they're watching me, it's a digital citizenship lesson, we're going over a contract, I will be transparent and say, we're going to talk. Talking's hard sometimes. So I'm going to come around and offer you a fidget. If you want to use it, I need it back. And I spray them down later when I've got them. If you care to use it, we do a little practice and talk about it's no eye contact and it's silent. So it shouldn't be banging or flipping or trading with my BFF. A couple people asked me about the marble ones. You can get big packages of these on Amazon. I can put a link in there. A couple of things people say, what if they break? They do sometimes, but they were cheap. What if a kid steals one? They do sometimes, but they were cheap. Honestly, if I start to identify, Ricky Sticky Fingers out there, usually that's the kid I ask to collect them. And I will sometimes say, I can tell you really want one. Let's do a couple more lessons and then I will have one for you. What color do you want me to save? You want me to save this green one for you? Awesome. So if you are about fidgets, I would suggest something like these that's very quiet. I do keep a bin of alternative toys for calming down. When I was a librarian at a special spot in the library, I don't love the whole, anytime you need to, off you go to the area of the relaxation. I invited specific kids to use them, and I did have toys that made some noise. And that's why they're not a fidget. And that's why it was something away. And it might be something you take with you, or if you're lucky enough to have your own room, you might have it. Again, it's not for everybody. You want them to calm the child. So nothing too loud, not the poppets. I'm so glad the poppets seem to be being phased out. For instance, I have a small kaleidoscope. So this does require eye contact, which means it's a toy, but it is very soothing. I do have one of these. I think everybody in the 80s had one of these next to their telephone. I've got someone in the room here who's like, yes, I had one. Just, this is a little fidget clicker. It's got a little bit of a noise. It's nothing that's going to stop your lessons. I also use story cubes. I've been surprised at how many kids like to use these, not for rolling around, although they would. If you've never seen story cubes, they're really fun opener game. They're dice and they have different images on them. And what I teach the kids, if you're going to use these, is just find 2 pictures and create a sentence with it. It can be a funny sentence. It can be a serious sentence. It's a way of redirecting their brain. It's tapping back into the left side of their brain if their emotional right side of the brain has gotten a little overloaded. And I'll say, I'm going to come hear your sentence. Tell me in a moment. So maybe I rolled fish and keyhole Oh, now I have to think of one. See, it really does turn on the left side of your brain. The fish prince was locked in the castle, but he swam through the keyhole and was able to rescue the diamond octopus. I don't know, but something to kind of engage that left side again. And these are fun for a morning game without using technology, rolling a couple dice and doing sentences. Rory's story cubes, and they have lots of suggestions online for what you can do with them. Any thoughts about fidgets or other calm down activities or toys? Lots of stretch breaks. They're so good. I'm just going to read it aloud for those who can't read it. Corey says, when I was in the classroom, I used to have exercise bands that go around the upper thighs and put them in front of 2 chair legs to help with fidgeting or tapping. When I teach remotely, I use it for myself. Yes. There's a lot of wonderful things you can do in chair. I did a lot of chair yoga when we were stuck at home a lot. Honestly, I ended up just teaching on the floor. I couldn't take it after too long. And talking with them, the self-regulation piece. When you feel like you've got that extra energy, let's go through a list of things you can do, but also knowing that if you're getting up 10, 12 times in a half-hour lesson, then that's something we need to work on, and it is disruptive. But if you have those bands, or it's not my favorite, but again, a lot of people like it, tracing your hand. There's a million of them out there. Offer a handful to your kids because they might be like me, tracing that. I think it feels weird. I don't know. You can digitally, me too, if you do as well. I'm much better with an object. I find that very helpful for me. There's a lot of research and a lot of YouTube videos out there about decluttering a space and relieving anxiety. And so decluttering the digital space, it's a whole nother presentation I do if you're ever interested, talking about decluttering your desktop and your Google Drive and your bookmarks. But decluttering the physical space can be very helpful. They're spending a lot of time looking at a shiny, shiny box. When they look up, they need to look at something peaceful. This is hard. I used to teach first grade, and it was probably an assault on the eyeballs, but we didn't have technology. Once in a while, I'd check out the iPod cart. Woo, and there's a little screen. But I had lanterns and rainbows and kid art everywhere. Right now, I live out of my car and travel to different schools. But as the librarian, I started drastically reducing the pieces I had in my library and really taking some time to look. Does this signage help or confuse? Is it too colorful? Is it filled with all the words? Could it be more simplified? There's research on a color scheme can really be helpful. That was a hard one for me because I love every color. I love rainbow, but a lot of children find that very hard. So I'm not talking about totally low STEM unless that's your thing, but just to gently reduce. If you are living in a place with projects and posters and things everywhere, you can do a simple 5 things a day challenge. And this can be in your own personal home. It can be in your car. It can be in your classroom if you happen to have one. Turning the board off when you're not using it. Again, a lot of us have boards or projectors. Projectors are harder because we all know you don't want to turn that bulb on and off again. That's really hard on it, but you can switch to a black screen. You will find if you just have the board on, a lot of kids will be staring at it. It's their rattle, just like we're looking at our phones when we don't really need to re-encourage that eye contact if it's culturally appropriate, or looking at objects or looking at paper or looking at art, and declutter and turn the board off. Those 2 are the big ones. Okay, here we go. And this is a good time to drop things in the chat, specific problems you're having with kids. Let's talk about those infractions because we built this foundation. We've had the talks, we've got the fidgets. They're still going to do some stuff. I'm going to grab this piece in the chat before I get there. Oh, ambience videos. Yes. Even just playing a white noise, there's something called brown noise or dark noise, which is a lower frequency, can be very helpful. A lot of the videos can be good. I assume you're talking about something like a fish tank or jellyfish. Sometimes they need it, and sometimes it can be that one thing too many. I will often highlight, and I'm just going to get up. I'm sure the guy who's running this is probably going to go, no, don't get up. Oh, he doesn't mind. I'm going to go grab a poster and show you an example of what I have up instead of an ambience video. Welcome back. This is just a quick poster I made in Canva. It's got some colors, but it's mostly white. It has a simple message, you are important. And I give them away as raffles. And I encourage teachers to hang them kind of behind them and to talk about with kids. You need to look away for a minute, pick a color on the poster. I've made mini I Spy posters, find the yellow things and talk with them about how to look at something that isn't a shiny box and put it out there. These screens are so fun. They're not great for our eyes. So what else could we look at? What else would be relaxing? All right, let's talk those infractions. Logical consequences, if possible. Is it fixable? One of the things that I think frustrates us all, despite all the citizenship, be careful with your technology. For instance, it can be dropped technology. They dropped it. All right, well, probably they didn't mean it. Is it fixable? So let's do that process together. Oh, you dropped your iPad before you go. Carl, how could you drop it? I told you not to. Whoa, let's check on that iPad together. Let's make sure it's okay. Maybe it's Minecraft and someone destroyed a castle I worked hard on. Is it fixable? Can you go help them with it? If it's a repeated issue, it's time for a class meeting on whatever it is and get the children's input. The concept of timeout versus time in. One of my children is adopted. She was fostered to adopt, and foster training is fascinating. And one thing they talked about was the concept of timeout versus time in. They specifically talk about not doing timeout because many children in foster care were already put in an emotional timeout or sent away from their parents. Time in says, I'm frustrated with you, or you're not on track. Come sit right next to me and let's look at this together. Hey, will you come with me? Will I go help this kiddo with his or her computer? Stay right with me. Keep them close to you. It's showing that they care, you care. It's getting them out of that situation, and it's not saying step outside the room. That being said, I do offer stepping out of the room or taking a walk up and down the hallway where I can see them if they need it. If I can tell this is a kid who might want the space. But if it's a kid who wants attention instead of the negative attention, time in, the positive attention, come with me. I want you right here with me, with a smile, not a frown if you can. Avoid asking, why did you do that? Because there's only two things. They either have no idea they did anything in the first place, or they know they did it and they don't care. They were gonna do it anyway. So I would leave it out altogether. There's no point in trying, why did you do that? And I think we do that because we are frustrated. Instead, what can you do? Be curious, but not accusatory. Let's think of something different infraction. You're welcome to drop them in there, something that kids are doing. When they have another window open behind the window they're supposed to be doing, a classic misuse of technology. Be curious about it. Often that's going to be enough. So you're circulating around the room. They're supposed to be coding, but back there's YouTube. Oh, you got YouTube on. What are you watching? Andrew Camarada, you like Diggers? Diggers are really cool. Come talk with me about that later. Close that tab for me right now and go back to the work we're supposed to be doing. They already know. They got caught. Just refocus them if you can. Be brave. Avoid tiptoeing around kids unless you know specific triggers, and throw in the chat if you know what movie that is. Probably everybody does because we are awesome nerds. Stand your ground, men. I think about my 2-year-old when we have a very teeny tiny little house, and so he stayed in our room. It's an old creaky one too, with creaky floors. And so anyone who's had a newborn in the room with them knows that you just need to go to the bathroom at 2 a.m., but you don't want to wake the baby. So you lie there hoping that you're not going to wake the baby. And eventually you do just go, baby's up. Well, you should have just gotten up to go to get the kid used to the noise in the first place. So if you know a kid's going to lose it over something, it might be okay to let them lose it over that. It might be a kid that you know, oh my gosh, every day this kid blows up about something. Okay, let it be early in the day. Let them have that blow up first, then they can have that calm down, because honestly, some children need to explode to get the correct chemicals to calm back down. So you might as well let them do it. Often we tiptoe around situations or 5 more minutes of screen time because we feel that things are peaceful and we don't want to ruin it. And gosh darn it, we're tired. As much as you can, be brave. Go into the confrontation as gently as possible because there's a lot of learning that can come from it. Redirect a kid, making it crystal clear. I'm just going to put in the plug to please never end sentences with okay. Today, we're going to carry our laptops with 2 hands. Okay. You have made an implied understanding. They have not honestly understood what you said, or again, they don't care. I taught for years at a bilingual school, so many of our children would come and hadn't learned much English yet. And I remember one of my first graders running around, smacking kids on the behind and saying, "I'm sorry," and then doing it again, "I'm sorry," and then doing it again. And I pulled him over and chatted with him in Spanish and said, "Brian, what does I'm sorry mean?" And he said, "It means I did it." And I said, "No, I'm sorry. Parece lo siento." And he's like, "Oh, no, I do not lo siento." Interesting. So really clarifying what you mean and not trying to give an implied understanding when they really don't. I do love that kid. He's in college now. Off-task behaviors or tabs behind tabs. I hear that a lot from teachers. Well, what can I do? You have to circulate. You really do. Each county has a different protocol for if you feel like their history is going to show some stuff that's incorrect. Again, I reiterate, it's almost never you saying, "Let me see your laptop. I'm going to go through the history." You can be honest with the kids about, you have signed a contract, whether you care to remember this or not, that says I will use it correctly and I will use it for academic work. I can get your laptop checked if we need to, but this would be your opportunity to kind of button that up. But it does mean that you have to do a lot of circulating and walking around. And we often encourage teachers, screens need to face you. Blatantly off-task behavior, in my opinion, they should lose the technology. I'm not saying all day, every day. Sometimes I have teachers say, "Well, what do I do if they won't give it up?" Well, if it's really, really bad, you're going to get admin. If it's technology that stays in your room, eventually they're going to go home. Then I would not give it back the next time. And that's avoiding that tiptoe. Next time when he gets his iPad, maybe next time he or she does not get the iPad or the Ozobot. They might be observing. Observing correct behavior is their task rather than coding. And it's the tiptoe and it's avoiding the conflict, but it's just putting it off until later. Charging devices. I know I'm almost out of time here before you guys hop in there. Sometimes that is in your control, sometimes that is not in your control. But if kids are often showing up with a dead device, and I know sometimes kids take care of it themselves, their share, do talk to the tech people in your school, or maybe it's yourself or your boss, about getting an extra cord or two. We don't have any extra cords. We can never get a cord. Well, the $10 knockoff for yourself from Amazon might bring you some peace. There's going to be cords somewhere. I would just create that auxiliary charging station so the kiddo can plug it in, and then I encourage them to walk away from it. They don't get to magically sit in the spinning chair at my desk. I don't have a desk, and get to work there. They do have to give up the technology while it gets enough juice to get going. But I would encourage getting an extra cord, even though that stinks. We shouldn't have to. It seems worth it to me. And when it gets to blatant tech misuse, you will have to get to your admin. Make sure you understand what your school's policy is, what your county's policy is, and make sure that you share the kid version with the kids so they know what's going to happen. All right, I made it in the time limit. The tech guy in here is very proud of me. Other questions, infractions, thoughts you have, you're welcome to unmute or drop them in the chat. That's right, Princess Bride. Anything else your kids are doing? Or are there any pieces that you think, I am going to start implementing that might work for my kiddos, things that are going to work for you? Daniel says, I did awesome. I've imparted all the wisdom. Your kids are going to be perfect tomorrow. They will not. Museum walk is wonderful. I love doing that. I love highlighting it. I have done in the past, if it's a class that's not super emotionally needy, I have done where they can kind of leave a token next to their favorite one when they really love. You got to be careful with that one. We also practice giving compliments. It's a whole nother session, but we talk about how to give useful feedback. It's okay to say something could be better as long as you give a how, instead of take away all those but lies and turn them into hows. Anything else, friends? I hope you're able to learn things and feed your kids something besides a Pop-Tart. What if you did a Pop-Tart? I hope it was brown sugar. And I'll go to the next one, the next slide. So if you want any of this information, feel free to take it. If you have a specific behavior problem that crops up, I love thinking through them. My email is on the screen there.